Hey there. So today, after careful deliberation, I've come to a decision. Almost all mainstream comics are pretty much a wash for me these days. There are a few names that are pretty much above reproach when I go out and I pick them up, but there are other names out there that are tantamount to cancer. Mark Waid, for example. At one time, I thought the slippery slope that he had been riding was perhaps the byproduct of having the wrong color skin or the wrong gender or the wrong identity within current year. I mean, imagine that when you think about it. Imagine in this day and age being somebody that identifies the way that Mark Waid does. No wonder you have to come across as arrogant and angry and the protector of all the time, because Mark Waid, well, if he doesn't do that, then he's probably relegated to the cutting room floor. However, after seeing things like the strong protect the weak, and Mark Waid noting, of course, that he's the strong, and anyone that isn't Mark Waid, but especially people of color and other people with different identities or different sexualities, they're the weak. I'd wondered about that. And then seeing him go out and basically harass a few Asians as he decided to attack a publisher today, well, that said even more about him. But it also says something about this industry, and it says something about the people that work within it. Because if gatekeeping is the method, and basically watching people do that all day long, wherein they cultivate an image where they're the good guys and they can't let anything else exist, well, that doesn't need my money. So I've kept a tab of all the people that have been involved in this, all the people going out and liking posts that are essentially comprised of gatekeeping principles, and those people, they don't get my money. They don't get my money for laughs. They don't get my money for anything. I will find copies of something to review if I want it, but they will never get a penny from me. Someone will either give me a free code or I will get a sample copy of something, but no more of my money and no more of my recommendations. They have drawn a line in the sand, and I understand that. I am saddened, too, that Antarctic Press decided to capitulate the way that they did. But I kind of understand why they did it as well, because they essentially have this lynch mob that is trying to drive them underground. They would have faced pressure after pressure, and I'm sure that the consummate professionals that we've dealt with within diversity in comics, within John Malin, within Brett Smith, they understood that, and they probably took it into account as well when they were talking to them, because the pressure was enormous. But it showcases exactly what's out there, and it showcases how these hate campaigns work. And there were so many of them on display. I mean, think about the level of this stuff when you think about it. We essentially had shops going out there and displaying hatred. They were colluding behind the scenes. And when they got caught at it, when they were called on it, essentially they did the thing that every good SJW does. They went and played the victim role. After playing the victim role, one of them had something vandalized. Now, it was interesting too, because they said right away that it was a DNC follower that did that, essentially broke out a piece of glass for easy entry, entered a place, and this comic book fan there, they didn't steal any comic books, they didn't steal anything of value, they took some petty cash and they wandered away. Isn't that very telling of someone that really loves comics to the point that they would do that they wouldn't touch anything of value and they wouldn't touch a comic book? But still, right away, that was blamed on people there. And right away, all of these people out there, they suddenly loved comic books and they suddenly loved comic book companies. Take a Tamara Bonvillain, for example, the person that talks about daily how some white cis male working at a comic shop, how they tried to do something terrible. Well, suddenly they were worried about privacy. Take the Mags Visaggio, for example, someone that is an ardent socialist, doesn't even believe in the fact that you should make money out there unless it's their money to make. Well, suddenly these businesses and their livelihood, they suddenly matter to Max. Over and over again, I hear these types of messages. Over and over again, too, I hear the right to stalk what you want. An interesting thing was argued today, too, by Mark Waid when he was talking about all of this. Mark Waid said that a place has the right to refuse to carry something unless it's based on, say, gender, on, say, faith, or so on. He made caveats where a Mags would never be able to be turned down and where he could argue about it, or where a Tamara Bonvillain could not be turned down, or even a Mark Waid could not be turned down. But somehow in this, he made it where a Richard C. Meyer definitely could be turned down. A John Malin could be turned down. A Brett Smith could be turned down because, like he said in the past, the things that the people out there identifying as marginalized, or the people that protect the marginalized, well, what they go through, it's a lot worse than what people like Brett Smith, a conservative, or what a John Malin, someone labeled as alt-right, or Richard C. Meyer labeled as God knows what, take your pick. It's worse than what they go through, because identity politics. So basically, again, he decided to go on and rail all day long talking about this idea of doxing, wherein he decided he was going to defend these LCSs that had again basically gotten together and were conspiring to push a publisher not to do something, thinking it would never be seen. After they came out and after the shops that they actually worked at were identified, Mark Waid came out against doxing. Funny enough, too, one of the people that he talked to all day long was Susan Auger. Now, Susan Auger is a known doxer. She is someone that goes out of her way to not only dox but threaten people. I had a run-in initially with Susan Auger on my earliest days of Twitter, wherein I saw Susan Auger actually threaten this person that wanted to be part of comic books. She was out there basically talking about Richard C. Meyer over and over again, utilizing his name when it had never been utilized before. This kid that had talked to them about wanting to be a comic book artist said that he wanted to go out and that he wanted to do that, but he felt bad about using that name, and maybe they shouldn't use that name too. Maybe this wasn't the right way to go about it. So, of course, Susan Auger basically went in, pulled up a message that this person had sent them, put out this person's real name while talking to them, and said that they knew who they were and they didn't think they had the right to be in there, and maybe they were choosing the wrong vocation. She didn't word it as nicely. She worded it very, very hostilely. And this person, they basically begged her. They basically pleaded. So she said, yeah, I'll put out a retraction for that on Twitter there. And then other people, though, they were dogpiling in saying, well, I think this person still, they haven't learned their lesson, and so on. These people were professionals in their vocation too. Professionals dogpiling some kid because they said, hey, I'm not quite comfortable with doxing. It's interesting too, that word doxing. So you mean to tell me that comic book people working for shops, these people working in them, talking about how they're going to go out, how they're going to be loud about getting something pulled, how they will not carry it, and they will not fulfill orders. That's the thing people like to leave out of this too. They will not fill orders. You go in, you ask for it, nope, can't get that there. Well, these people, they don't want their shops named. And after their shops are named, of course, that's doxing. When you say that they're affiliated with something, you say that they need to stand by their principles, nope, that's a bridge too far. And yet, Mark Waid is the same guy that went out there and announced to the world that at Comic-Con, he wanted that guy, Richard C. Myers, the stalker, the misogynist, the terrible human being. He wanted people to identify him and come and tell him if he was at a con right away. Now, that name had never been in the mainstream narrative before, but after that, after he was introduced by Mark Waid, then, well, that name became something that was sang over and over again. So you tell me who's the doxer there, Mark. You tell me who's the ugly, reprehensible person. The guy who goes out of his way to basically attack a publisher, the guy that goes out of his way to basically release someone's name because they don't like what they say. That is the face of comic books now. And well, Antarctic Press, they eventually caved in to people like that because I'm sure that some of the threats there, well, they're probably frightened. But let's look at what they said. After careful consideration, it is the decision of Antarctic Press to not release the comic series Jawbreakers. Antarctic Press is a staunch believer in creators' rights and giving creators a chance to showcase their creation and allow that creation to be judged on its merit. Many forces, many of them should be viewed with great trepidation about how our society acts, have led to this decision. We do not take this decision lightly, as we do believe that there should be a separation between art and the artist, and that separation has been blurred in our decision. We appreciate all our supporters and detractors in this process. Thank you for taking the time to read our statement. This statement will be removed in 7 days. Now, the way that I read that actually sounds like criticism when I see it. Other people have told me that that is actually criticism of the forces out there that are trying to manipulate this. But to myself, it sounds like our case, the thing that asks for professionalism from an industry, wherein we don't get called Nazis, alt-righters, sexists, racists, and on. Well, that's apparently a bridge too far. When we want a good product in a declining industry where we see numbers that come in stagnant, stale, and reduced month after month, well, that's a bridge too far as well. Those things bother me. And again, I'm not trying to be hostile to Antarctic Press because they've put out things that are very interesting on both sides, and I like some of the people that they've put out there. Still, I am very disappointed that they would do this, and I think they should have reconsidered it because the people that they gave into, they are essentially terrorists, and they have held comic books hostage. Now, Mark Waid, after he did this, he sat in there for a little while, about 2 hours, and he kept railing on about comic books and how he understood the LCS. Now, it's interesting how somebody can do that, how they can talk about how they love the industry and how they understand it, and of course you don't. You don't because you are the wrong thinker. You are the bad person. Well, let me tell you, Mark, you have essentially cost comic book companies a lot of money now because comic book consumers, they're not going to put up with this tripe. LCSs, they'll take it on the nose too because of what you've done there. So you tell me, has the caveat that you added there wherein you wanted to make sure that something didn't see the light of day, has that been beneficial to comic book industry at large? Something with declining sales, have you helped it as you've made consumers pull a little further back? Have you helped out the comic book pros that you work with? All of those people you say you're defending, are you helping them when you make people walk away? Because I can tell you, you can label people whatever you want, but at the end of the day, we are people that are buying comic books. I don't patrol them to see how someone identifies. I simply buy comic books, but I now am hyper aware of anyone that you work with or anyone that has been associated with this mess, and I will no longer buy them, and I will influence people not to do the same, because this story is one of gatekeeping, and it's ugly. It's something that we've fought against in other names, in other forms and fashions, and yet when you do it, you think it's somehow okay. Well, it's not okay, and people need to voice that loudly and proudly. So what have you done to help the LCS within this too? I'm wondering. And I would ask Mark Waid this too. I went to find his Facebook that he had been talking on all day long after looking at it for a while, but when I went to comment, it actually went to this. It went to a dead picture instead of that eerie little rabbit that's always there. That wasn't there anymore. There wasn't anything there as far as an image, and then when I went to click in, well, he had disappeared. He was gone. Mark Waid, poof. All those hot takes out there, all the tripe and all the banter and barbs that he had thrown out of his way, he had basically erased it all. Now, he's had to do a lot of erasing today, too, because he has taken his lumps. If you looked at any post that he had, he essentially pulled down post after post because he was out there harassing people. He was out there harassing publishers. He was doing the very thing that he says he is against. He had to basically pull down any comments and cultivate this image where nobody was talking, and yet people were actually looking at this because it had to look magnanimous. He had to look like he was above reproach because Mark Waid, he is the defender of the weak because, of course, he is the strong, and he always has to look strong. That's the thing I've been saying about social media. Social media is the meteorite that comes in and it is killing the dinosaur. And the dinosaur is what we think of as artists. Because artists, they didn't look like this before social media. Basically, they had a cultivated image. It was hidden behind write-ins, and it was hidden at your comic book conventions. They were basically the guys that created something awe-inspiring. And now, when you look at them again, when you look really hard, some of them are very good people, and some of them are even the thing that you used to think. But all too often, those reflections that you see out there, well, they're petty, shallow people. And they're people that you not only don't want to associate with, but you never ever want to financially support. Now, this thing, of course, at least has a happy ending. If you watched the DNC live stream, you'll know that he's gone out and he's created his own company. So this thing, it will see the light of day. It's going to go out there, and it's going to go out in a form that people can't control. Basically, the money that you put in, it's going to go to a good thing. That's something that people ask me early on within a live stream. Where will all that extra money go? Well, that extra money will go to bring better products to you. I think that's a great thing too, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of money there, and basically you can create more products and you can keep this ball rolling. Not only can you do that, but essentially there is no mechanism to keep this thing from happening. There is no way to silence people, and people have been silenced for far too long. The Mark Waids out there, they have gone out of their way to be very loud and to be very threatening while pointing that loaded index finger right at your forehead and saying, if you then does not take very well. And well, we need to point our finger back and say, hey, we are the consumers here, not you. We power this industry, not you. Without us, what you do is a vocation. It's just a glorified hobby while you serve me my French fries. So anyhow, tell me what you think about this. Tell me what you think about all of this stupidity that you've seen there. Doesn't it make you mad? Because this stuff, it really infuriates me. I've fought this fight before where people can go out and they can do and say things and where they can be represented. I actually fought this fight for real, marching with people, doing things beyond hashtags. And well, when I look at what it's been boiled down to, it's a miserable shadow that they've thrown out that really comes from this thing that should be much better. Anyhow, thank you.